and the level of anxiety is really quite sad to see, because this does not have to be a stressful process. This does not have to be an anxious process, and this does not have to be a process of staring at your phone, waiting for it to ring, or seeing somebody else have communication you haven't had and wondering what went wrong. So we're going to start from the start. I'm going to work all the way through the steps I mentioned, and then we're going to have some time for you to get all the answers you need or any information you've heard differently, and we can talk over any aspects of the process. So the first thing you can do, and this is not discussed enough, because I'm in a lot of soccer parent groups on Facebook. I'm in a lot of college recruitment groups on Facebook. And why I do that is we're obviously active recruiters, and we need to have our finger on the pulse of the popular narrative. You know, whether it's right, wrong, true, false is not the issue. We need to know what people commonly think. And we also run ID camps, so it's kind of a target market for us. And again, we need to know what people think, what people are looking for, what would help people, and what's going on that would not help people. And here's what doesn't help people. I saw a thread saying, my son is going out to an ID camp in, I think it was Kentucky. Can people please give me examples of how he can help him stand out to the coaches? And there was 93 responses. And not one of them said be good at soccer. Not one. Shake his hand, clean the balls up, give him a copy of your resume, give him a copy of your test scores, look him in the eye when you shake his hand, you know, squeeze his hand when you shake his hand. That can get a bit hard work when you're dealing with 50 kids who seem hell-bent on breaking your knuckles to get a scholarship. So all those aspects are overrated. And while basic manners are nice, it's no more true to say that basic manners will get you a place playing at Dartmouth in D1 than they get you a place at Manchester United. The core of this is to be good at something. And you're all good at soccer. That's why you're in the Iconz program, right? And the key to being good at something is to focus on it and be fully present and invest significant energy in it while it's going on, whether it's soccer, poetry, music, academics, whatever it is. That is the key to being good. Would we all agree with that?
Absolutely.
So if you go to a ID camp and you have 90 things swimming around your head and how to be good, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and that leads you to take your focus away from, I have to be good at what I'm good at. If I'm a defender, you know what I'm going to do at this ID camp? I'm going to win headers, I'm going to win tackles, I'm going to win possession, and I'm going to be the best defender at this event. That will help you. If you're a forward, I'm going to get shots off. I'm going to make 10, 11, 12 runs to get the ball. I do not care how many runs I have to make. I'm going to keep running. And if I make 9 through runs and I get the ball once, that's good enough for me. But whether I get the ball or not, these college coaches are going to see how good I am and how hard I work. That's kind of what happens with Jamie Vardy. Got an interesting test for you all here. Does the chat work here, Laurie?
Yes, it would, buddy.
Laurie?
Yeah, can you hear me?
What I want you all to do, what I want everybody to do is read this sentence I just put in the chat, and then I want you to send back to me via message how many times you see the letter F in that sentence. So just read it. You can do this as well, Laurie. You're going to see how many Fs, and I don't want it to go into public chat so people can see your answer. I want you to direct message your answer to me. How many times you see the letter F? Answers should start coming in pretty soon. Pretty short sentence. Doesn't take that long. Answers are coming in. They're all wrong. Not surprising, but they're all wrong. 0. Woof. We'll talk about that one.
Yeah, name names afterwards.
So raise your hand raise your hand on your camera if you're surprised when I tell you that only one kid has the correct answer. Some people aren't surprised now, seen it all before. So that's just reading, basic reading. That's not complex soccer. That's not athletics. That's not running away from a defender, having Coach Laurie shouting at you, having to do things quickly under pressure. That's just reading a sentence on your computer screen. And there were 6 F's in that sentence. And everybody got it wrong. And we'll count you through them now because I can see through facial expressions you don't believe me. You think I'm lying. Finished. How many is that, Laurie? 1.
Yep.
Files. How many is that?
1.
Finished files? 2. Are the result of? 3. Years of? 4. Scientific? 5. Study combined with the experience of? Years. But if you go read that back, you'll get 6 F's. So why is that important? It's important because you can all read and you all know what the letter F looks like and you all got it wrong. So if you want to stand out at an ID camp or a training session or a game, if you're focused properly, you'll be able to do all the things that you're able to do. Good first touch, good passing, good movement off the ball, good defending, tracking runs, getting forward. All these things you already know. You can apply them under pressure of an ID camp environment or a competitive game because you're concentrating. So to concentrate on the issue at hand is the way to stand out. Not to worry about shaking people's hands. Not to write a handwritten resume and hand it to the coach. Not to give him your test scores there on the day. That's not how you stand out. Trust me, every kid's doing that. There's absolutely nothing unique about it. But when you see kids fully engaged and fully focused and fully playing with high energy levels, that is very rare nowadays. That is very rare. A player that defends with just as much energy as he attacks is very rare. A player that takes as much pride into pressing and forcing a mistake out of an opponent pays as much attention to that as he does passing the ball himself. Very rare. We're a generation of kids now and players that we love it when we're on the ball and we love it when we're attacking, but all the rest of the game, meh. So you really want to stand out, do all of it. Don't break off parts of the game that you value and don't value. You want to stand out, show work ethic and energy in every single facet of the game. Be able to be as engaged in a game. If you're 2-0 up, dominating possession, have that level of engagement if you're 1-0 down and struggling that day. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter that you shook his hand. And it doesn't matter that you helped pick the cones up. And it doesn't matter that you were nice and you looked in his eye. Because everything between those lines, that's going to be about 95% of your recruiting and identification process. So every time you step on the field, you should want to be focused, be present, and invest energy. And don't be a passenger. A passenger is someone who's going just great when his team's playing well. If everyone else is doing well, he can do well. If we're 2-0 up, he'll do well. If we're struggling, he'll struggle too. If we go 2-0 down, he or she'll go 2-0 down and they'll sulk too. You're really just reacting emotionally to the situation. You're actually doing very little to change it and create it how you want it to be. That's the most important part of any identification process, college, pro, or anything. Steer away from people who fill your head with nonsense because we're not seeing all 6 F's in that sentence now because we're not fully focused. The more external noise enter your heads, the less detail you see. And if you want to know, and we'll move on now, but how important this is, if we say you took 30 seconds to read that sentence and you said there were 3 F's, you missed 3 details in 30 seconds. You missed 6 details in a minute. You missed 540 details in a 90-minute game. Those details could differ. Were you marking your man at the corner? Was your first touch good? Was your pass good? Did you make the right decision? Did you take your touch away from pressure? Did you realize you were under pressure with a defender? Could you see the open man? All as the game goes, your brain has got to see these details. And we aren't really a species that is capable of getting the level of missed details down to 0, but we can get it down a lot lower than 540. And you can read one sentence and catch all the F's and not miss them because your brain was either jumping forward to, okay, coach, whatever, give me the next piece of information, and now I can't even read, or jumping back to, this guy's kind of insane, huh? Or this guy's kind of interested. Whatever it is, you weren't focusing on the task at hand. And if you can't get over that, that will haunt you. You play games and you be stressed out because of you're playing a bad team or a good team in the league, or you're going to win a trophy. You go to an ID camp, you're stressed out about the coaches watching you. You go on the Iconz select team, you're stressed out because it's new teammates. You go back to your club team and you're stressed out because your coach is playing a formation you don't want. Your brain will always find a problem if you let it. And the key is to always bring it back in and focus on the task at hand and the key important elements of it. Next thing, team hopping. And I bring this up because this is another common way that kids are hurting themselves right now. And I'm not doing this because Laurie's asked me to do it. I'm doing it because the culture we live in. Have you either done yourself? Sorry, what's that, Laurie?
I didn't know about this until you told me earlier.
Oh, it's a huge thing. And honestly, some of it's from soccer coaches, but more of it's from admissions departments, especially when people are moving schools. But have you either done yourself or seen a teammate be in a situation, the situation wasn't really ideal, and they've just moved to another team? You ever seen it?
Of course.
I know I have. Okay. Have you ever seen that person move to the other team and have similar or different issues, but there's still issues? So we're going to move again. Yeah. Well, the hand's going up right now. The last resort, your last option should be to move to a team. And here's why I say this. Whether it comes to you at college, whether it comes to you in the latter years of high school, or whether it comes to you in life after college, there's going to be a time in your life where the circumstances around you are less than ideal. And the only way out or through them is to be able to focus, perform, and work under less than ideal circumstances. And if you come to Dartmouth College, I don't even care what youth team you played for, you are in for the hardest year of your life. Nobody outside of college has had academic rigor like the Ivy League gives you. Nobody. It's going to be the first time in your life usually that you live away from your friends and your family. There's stressor too. It's going to be the highest level of soccer you've ever played. If you think to high school when the freshmen and the seniors and how physically different they are, that's massively exaggerated in college soccer. You're playing against guys who've been in the college game for 4 years. They've been eating a certain way. They've been hydrating a certain way. They've been lifting for the off season 3 times, and they are big and they are strong and they are fast. And you have to compete with them head to head now if you want game time. Some kids wait 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, that's fine. But if you want game time, you have to compete with that now. That's really difficult. And if that player who comes into college at every other point in his career, every time he's come against some difficulty, like I'm on the bench, or I don't like this teammate, or I don't like this playing style, and he's just moved team, you're not really ready for that. You've not really built up your resilience, because you can't build up resilience without experience. And I don't remember quite when it was, but there was definitely a time in my life where I would walk into environments and I would doubt myself and I would wonder whether or not I could do it. And I would even probably, if I made me predict I would have failed at that point in time. And I'd just say to myself, yeah, I've been here before. I don't think I can do this now today, but I didn't think I could do so-and-so, and I did that just fine. You know, I don't think I could get through a year here, but I felt like this before, and it went just fine. It's never as bad as you fear it's going to be. And you do have to build that memory bank up. So when schools get applicants that have been to 2 or 3 different high schools, when college coaches get players that have been on 5 different teams in 5 years, rightly or wrongly, you get a lot of people assuming that this is a kid who needs the environment and the surroundings he's in to be perfect before he can play, rather than a kid that will work on his perspectives and his framing and his own attitude to fit into a given environment. Because no college is going to design the environment around you. None. And you think you want that, but you don't. Because if you went to a school like that, they'd design it to keep you happy, but it wouldn't be a month until they were designing it to keep somebody else happy. And it's just a never-ending spiral of filling emotional black holes with players and parents who will ultimately never be happy. It's a real skill in life to say, okay, my first impression of this situation is A, B, C, and D. I might be right. I might not be right. That's a humility lots of people lack in life. Let's see. Let's give it some time. Let's play it out. Can I do things differently here? Can I act differently? I don't really like this tactical system, but maybe this coach that's coached at this level for 30 years knows something I don't at 18 years old. What a concept that would be, right? And let's buy into this and let's see how it is. And the reason we have to do this is when you get out the other end of Dartmouth, if you want to play pro soccer, if you get to play for Man City, good for you. But 99% of players won't. There's only one Zach Steffen so far come out the college game. So if you want to go play pro soccer, you're going to go play the position you are told and the system you are told and the style that you are told. And I know that is a complete flip from youth soccer, but it should be. You pay for youth soccer. People try to keep you happy and develop you. But then when you get to college, you'll have college coaches looking at you and saying, just remember, you want somebody to pay you to act like this. You know how good you've got to be at something to have somebody want to pay you to do it? You know how adaptable, how flexible you have to be? You know how easily it has to be for you to follow instruction? And this team over here, go by, throw yourself into it wholeheartedly? Because trust me, I know it doesn't happen now to you, and you'll get like kind of a halfway house in college. But if we really do have aspirations of pro soccer, which Paul and Laurie have told me lots of kids do here, you better get used to that environment, that if you're getting paid, they don't really want you to run the team. They don't want to know what position you prefer. They don't want to know what style you prefer. They don't want to know what you'd feel better doing. They want players who can perform in positions and ways and systems the group needs. And it's an entire 180 from where you are now. But that doesn't make it wrong. That just means you have to realize if you want to go, that's how life's going to be. Because we have Dartmouth alumni on Wall Street. We have Dartmouth alumni working in Hollywood. We have Dartmouth alumni working in medical schools in the medical field. And none of them step out of college and go into these environments and start laying down demands of how they want these environments to be. All of them have to fit in. All of them have to perform. All of them have to realize that some things they like and some things they don't like, but ultimately they're going to have to be a productive member of this environment. That is, I believe, a big flaw of all of youth sports in America right now, that we've gone way too far away from that. And a lot of that teaching has to get done in college, which is arguably too late for some kids. The next thing I've got up here is tournaments, showcases. So the one thing I like about Laurie's program here is there's some real desire to get you playing at high levels, get you playing at good levels of exposure. And he's too humble to say it himself, but you're playing with a man right now who's played in the English Premier League. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, coaches all over America telling you how things are in the EPL and telling you how things are at the top of European soccer, having never kicked the ball at that level, never spent a day in a training session, never lived a single minute of it. So you have, as a player, a real resource here of somebody who has been at that level, seen firsthand success, seen firsthand failure, lived firsthand lessons of things that help you succeed and things that don't, and someone to lead you. That's a very special resource. And I think at times that is lost today because some people sell things very well. And some people study things and they teach things very well. But if you want to learn from someone, what's a real good idea is to find someone who's been where you want to be and walk the path from where you are to where you want to go, and then listen. Like I said, listen. Not tell him how you want things to be. Not tell him how much more preferable it would be for you or easier if A, B, or C. Listen and learn. You've really got a special resource right in front of you here. And you'll go to the games and you'll go to the tournaments and you'll be put under pressure, and we can talk in those environments, and then you get the feedback after, and you keep going down that cycle of the 4 years of high school. That is a great resource. When it comes to ID camps, I've wrote down here, I would say think about it. Don't dismiss it. Because I can tell you right now, when we played Princeton 2 years ago, the kid that scored the winning goal was at our ID camp. I personally coach Wyatt Omsberg, who is right now a starting centre-back on the Chicago Fire, played for Dartmouth. I was his youth coach from the age of U14, and I know before the 4-day residential camp, Dartmouth didn't want Wyatt. They wanted a kid from an MLS academy, and he played for the GPS Portland Phoenix in Maine, a premier team. And it was only the 4 days of camp that switched that. So reality is you don't have the time and the money and the expense to go to every single camp you're invited to. But if you are interested in a school, those ID camps are a very good idea, because when they come watch you play your tournament games, they certainly get a glimpse of where you are level-wise. But if you go to the ID camp, they can kind of manipulate the drills you do. And if you're a good goalkeeper, they can put you on the weakest team. And if they're not sure what you like defending crosses, they can put you in a crossing drill and make you defend 50 crosses in 20 minutes. And it's all very advantageous. But what I would say is don't just go badge chasing. Don't go, oh, I want to go to Iconz camp because I love Yukon. And they emailed me. I would say pay attention to the feedback you are getting. And if you like a school and that school has called you and that school has reached out to you and that school has watched one of your games with Iconz or with your club team or with your school, then I would think it's a worthwhile investment to go to their ID camp. If you like a school and they're ignoring your emails and they're not picking the phone up and they haven't been to your games, I'm not saying don't go. It's not for me to tell you. I'm saying there is a far, longer odds of success in that scenario. Does that make sense? Again, they're great resources, but just pay attention, not just to who you like, pay attention to what you're hearing back. And when it comes to that, hearing back, if you're a freshman or a sophomore, you're not going to hear much. Don't let it stress you out. It just is what it is. You know, people are recruiting seniors. People are recruiting juniors. More importantly, people are coaching their own team on campus. You've only got so many hours in the day. So it's only when you've done all your to-do list for the week, you might put a little bit of time into communication with freshmen, sophomores, which by rule can only be generic emails and camp invites anyway. It's not until June 15th, after you completed sophomore year, that you're allowed, junior year, I think even. Trapped over in that one. But that you're allowed to actually go back and forth and get on the phone with people. Class of 23 high school is who we just started communicating with yesterday, officially. Until then, they were just getting generic camp invites. Now, why that's important is a lot of parents are like, they'll go to Laurie, well, they're never emailing us, they're never calling us, we never hear back from them. Well, if you're a freshman or a sophomore, you're not going to. It's nothing to do with how good you are as a player. You are just behind the current team on the priority list, behind the seniors on the priority list, behind the juniors on the priority list. And a lot of people burn negative energy getting stressed out. And then you go on Facebook and you read how Nick Saban just signed some 11-year-old to Alabama football. It's all lies. It's all complete lies. There are written NCAA laws against it. You know, and if some guy has said, okay, Nick wants to give you a scholarship when you become of legal age, if that happened, which it probably didn't, you'll notice there's never any quotes in these ridiculous articles, then trust me, either side can pull the plug like that. So that is no doing nothing but spike anxiety, and it's a complete illusion, especially at schools like us, because imagine Coach Bo goes up to a freshman and says, I want you to play for the Dartmouth. You're the best player I've ever seen. And then imagine goes into the Dartmouth admissions office and says, I've seen this freshman. Best kid I've ever seen. Okay, what's his GPA going to be after his junior year? Don't know. What's his SAT scores going to be? Don't know. What's his class rank going to be? Don't know. What do you think admissions is going to say to Coach Bo? Yeah, man, we'll let that kid into an Ivy League school. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. It's lies. It's not a dramatic word. It is flat out lies when people are telling you this kind of thing. And the sad thing about it is it's causing stress because you've got freshmen and sophomores all over America wanting to commit because of fairy tales on the internet when it's just not something that happens. Now, during your junior year, you'd be very wise to start paying attention to who's replying to your emails and who's calling you back and who's at your games. And then you'd be very wise to say, oh, okay, all these schools are ignoring me. All these schools I hear back from, and these schools won't leave me alone. This is where you should be focusing your college search, because usually knocking on the door repeatedly of a D1 program, just hoping that they change their mind, does not work. You know, usually schools that you're in contact with are where you end up going to play. And if you say to yourself, oh, well, you know, I really want to go to Dartmouth because Dartmouth's an Ivy League school and I want to go there so bad, I don't care if I play soccer or not. Have at it. Fine. But if you say to yourself, I want to go to Dartmouth and I want to play soccer at Dartmouth, and you've never been recruited at all, and 8 kids have, that can be really tough. Because every school's going to allow you a walk-on tryout by rule, but you also have to understand, let's say University of South Florida have gave a kid money and a walk-on comes to camp and outplays him for a week, he's not necessarily making the team. Right, wrong, fair, unfair. You know, someone who has been handed school money, that's going to be a real tough conversation for that head coach to go to the AD and say, hey, man, I know we just gave this kid tens of thousands of dollars, but this random kid just beat him out on a walk-on, so now we're kicking this kid off the team. Not something that's really going to happen. And I understand the frustration at that in many areas and how that might seem unfair, but all I would say is don't put yourself in that position. There are thousands of schools in America. There are lots of good college programs. You all have a lot of time ahead of you to communicate with these programs. Don't put yourself in the position of being a blind walk-on because you're putting yourself in a real tough spot. Next up here, we've got money. Now, money is another misunderstood thing because when it comes to money, a D1 school has 9.9 athletic scholarships. Somebody unmute themselves and guess what an average roster size is of a D1 school.
24 people.
24? Little on the low end. Not a million miles away, though. I'll give one person a chance to guess. Good guess, though.
28.
Closer. Closer. The average is 30. The team that just won the D1 National Championship, Marshall, has 57. The smallest I know of is 24. 9.9 scholarships. That math doesn't quite go, does it? You got 9.9 scholarships. You got 30 players. You now have to feed 30 players financially with 9.9. So right out the gate, nobody gets a full scholarship. Literally nobody. Because you could be the best player in college soccer, and if you break your leg, you are dead weight. They've used 10% of their salary cap on you. So what it is it's a game to give paid kids as little money as they can. And make no mistake, athletic scholarship money, if you're injured long term, it's at risk. If you come in and they think you're going to be a starter and you're not a starter, that money starts to go down. Now, that is not nice. But every parent who complains about that couldn't deny the fact that you would do that too. Because if you only had 9.9 scholarships and you had to feed 30 players, you'd constantly be trying to chip and change and try and spread your money evenly to keep everybody happy. And keeping everybody happy is a tough thing to do. So ways you can get more money. Writing to schools and saying, I want a full athletic ride is not a good thing. Don't write it. You almost price yourself out the game. Because the first response you're going to get will be, you're not that good. You're a good player. I like you. You're not that good that you're getting a full ride. No one at our program in the last 10 years has had a full ride, and you want one? Woof. That's a tough way to go into a negotiation. But you can get athletic aid money. Somebody unmute themselves and tell me how you think you get, academic aid money. Somebody unmute themselves and tell me how you think you get academic aid money.
Good grades.
Good grades, exactly. Good test scores. So if you've got good grades and good test scores, and that might qualify you for anywhere from 30 to 50% scholarship, now you only need 50 to 70% from the soccer team. You might be able to get a couple of grants, couple of loans from your high school counselor. So you could even go to a coach and say, I would actually only need 30, 40% scholarship for a full ride because this is the academic money I qualify for. And your guidance counselor can do that math for you based on test scores and grades in the school you're talking to. And I qualify for this grant. So now you could look at two players and it could be pretty close. One would be better than the other. But if one of those kids needs a full ride and one of those kids needs only 30, 40%, it's not even close as to which one of those kids we're going to end up signing. Does that make sense? So I know a lot of kids roll their eyes. You'll hear it from Laurie. You'll hear it from your parents. You'll hear it from your guidance counselor that you've got to have good grades to play soccer. And you'll be like, yeah, whatever, man. Just give me the ball. That is a very, very true statement because that will turn into when a college coach looks at you. If he looks at a kid who needs a full ride, he's looking at that kid and he'd be like, if you want to come play for us, you better be really, really good immediately. You better be a freshman starter and you better be top 5 on our roster. That's a real tough bar to go into college in. But if you've got good grades and you need less money and you seem like a good character that they might want in the locker room, then you might say, yeah, you're not there right now, but 1 year, 2 year, 3 years in college, you develop these couple areas of the game, you might end up a real player and we'll be patient with you and develop you. That's the door you can get in if you've got good grades. And that is, trust me, a much easier door to enter a college program than I need a full ride scholarship. And you really have to help me get in admissions. That is two completely different players that pass those bars. Does that make sense? Yeah. Next up is landmarks in the college search. So when I say landmarks, I mean schools being interested in you. You should pay attention to when you start your junior year starts, are people calling you? If they're calling you, that's a time investment of half hour, an hour. If they're emailing you, I could copy and paste email 100 kids in the next 5 minutes, but I could probably only call 2 in the next hour. So it's a real difference. Do they invite you to the campus? Do they ask for your grades? Do they want to see your test scores? Do they want an admission read? Every time a school asks you this kind of thing, it's a real sign of interest on their end. And think of it this way, if they never ask for your grades, you have a right to question if they're interested because they don't even know you go to school until they've seen a transcript. So usually if you're chasing a school and getting kind of generic answers and you're not sure if they're really interested in you or not, it's a great question. Would you like to see my grades, coach? And if they're ambivalent or the answer's no, that's probably not a great sign. And then if they do get your grades, then they can usually tell you, hey, you're in a position where you would be in a good spot for admissions with us. You might need to get a higher test score. You might need to get an A or a B in this particular class, and they can give you something of substance. None of those conversations can be had before they see the transcript. Just like we can't talk to you about whether you'd play as a freshman before we see you play. Does that make sense? So that is the basic topics I wanted to cover. The rest of this, and we got plenty of time left. We're 41 minutes in, and I can overrun if people have got questions that need answering. What questions do either you guys or your parents have on the college process?
Stu, just before you kick in there,
Yeah.
Bear in mind, I know you're English well, but you're in the system. Can you explain to everyone, for those that don't know, the difference with Ivy League? Okay, because some may or may not know. And
Ivy League. Yeah, the difference. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
No, that's fine, mate. Go.
The difference with Ivy League is we're the best academic schools in the country, if not the world. You know, you've got Stanford calling themselves the Ivy League of the West. They're not in the Ivy League. Northwestern call themselves the Ivy League of the Midwest. They're not in the Ivy League. The Ivy League is 8 schools, and you can Google it. It's decades and centuries old, and it is the schools that are measured the best. Now, I know that there's a million different magazines out there with rankings. But the fact is, when they put rankings down to average alumni salary when they leave and work, Ivy League wins out. When you start searching graduation rate and having a job within 10 months of graduation, Ivy League wins out. When you look at incoming SAT scores and GPAs, Ivy League ranks out. All the real core academic and career after college measurings, the Ivy League schools are coming out at the top of. And what that means athletically is you can't just get in just because you're a good player. You know, there are some schools out there, mid-majors, nice schools, but not Ivy League level academically, but certainly good schools. And you can get in if the soccer coach helps you. But how America works is usually every school has an average academic index. And what an academic index is, it's a calculation of GPA, test score, and class rank. So let's say, and I'm going to throw fictional numbers out there here, and I'm going to make them real easy to understand. But let's say Dartmouth as a school had an average EI of 240. That's the average student that gets in. Dartmouth might say to the athletic department, you can bring in athletes this year of an average of 220, and then they can go up above the average to get the school to 240. And then they could say to the soccer team, you got to bring in an average of 220. So the Ivy League floor, the worst student in the Ivy League, it has to be within one standard deviation of your average EI, would be about 200. So what Dartmouth would do is if they signed a player who was an unbelievable player, but way below the AI, he's like a 200, trust me, that's still a very good student. That's still a high threes GPA, and it's still good SAT scores. But in the Ivy League world, it's a low student. Dartmouth now has to sign a player at 240, so the two players average 220 and we stay on track. Or Dartmouth has to sign 5 more players above the average to get back. So when you go and you sign these athletic players of low academic index, it has a knock on the entire class. It goes back to what I was saying. It's not just, is he good enough to play for Dartmouth? He better be so good he can win us some games if we're going to do that. That's how the whole Ivy League works. Every school has an average EI. Every school athletic department has an average EI. And every men's soccer team has an average EI. And if you just so you know how hard it is to quote unquote cheat, when an Ivy League school brings in a student that's more than one standard deviation below the school AI, those academic deans meet together annually and they have to justify those cases to the rest of the league. Now, word of mouth examples I've heard of presidents' daughters being discussed in those meetings. I have heard of very famous billionaires who have promised to build science labs and offer a certain number of jobs and career pathways to graduates at certain schools. There is no school going to have that conversation because, oh, hey, man, you know, if you sign this player, our men's soccer team might win 15 games as opposed to 12 the year before. Totally different planet. Doesn't happen. Now, when you see these schools in the middle academically and they can get you in and the Ivy Leagues can't, it's not that they care more about sports. It's just that they might have a 180 average EI. So, yeah, now they can sign 170s and 160s because they're good players. So you're always going to find a pattern of the schools that can dip the lowest for athletes. If that's how you're getting in, it's going to be commensurate with the average student of that school. And the average student of a Dartmouth, I'm not going to publicly embarrass any school, but there is hundreds of schools in America that their average student is a much lesser AI figure. So we still play D1. We compete D1. Last season we played 2019. We actually beat Michigan State, who's a Big Ten team, and we're coming off a Final Four. We lost 3-1 on the road to Wake Forest. They were number 1 in the country. We tied 2-2 with UConn. They're a national power. So we're competing at that level. It's just not quite as easy to get in academically.
Okay, mate. Thanks. That's good. Guys, if anybody's got questions, if you're not comfortable asking them, you can put them in the chat as well. I know Maddie's got a question for you, which is what you personally, Stu, what's the first thing you look for as a coach when you see a player?
That's an impossible answer, and the reason is that I would probably, Maddie, give you a different answer for every position on the field. But I guess
Maddie's a defender, Stu.
Maddie's a defender. What kind of centre back, full back? What's that?
She's a right back.
Right back. So the first thing I would look at evaluating a right back, Maddie, is 1v1 defending. We want to be able to know at Dartmouth, because when we go into these games, I've just said Michigan State, Wake Forest, Yukon, Princeton, good teams. We want to know that the opposing attacker that's facing you is going to have a quiet day. That's the first thing we'll look for in a right back. So good foot skills, good understanding of when to press the ball, good understanding of body position and not getting yourself side on so the defender can go both ways on you, and ability to block shots and crosses. After that, then it would be your first touch and your ability to pass the ball. And then after that, it would be your ability to overlap and join the attack. And I know we live in a generation where the game's presented differently on the TV, but it is in that order. You know, we don't want a quote-unquote Trent Alexander-Arnold who's going to get us 17, 20 crosses in a game, but we can't rely on the opposing left winger being shut down. Because, you know, the admission standards I just talked about, they lead to the fact that lots of times we might be the personnel quote-unquote underdog in the game. Now, we win lots of those games, but you don't win those games by not being able to defend. And we want to know that that winger on your side is not going to be a problem for us throughout the day. And then things on top of that, fitness. Obviously, your performance in your last half hour of the game is going to differ from the first half hour. We're going to notice that. Competitive spirit, you know, a high energy, intensity, all those kind of things are what we'd look like.
Thanks,
We forgive a lot of things. What we as a program don't like is kids who are completely invested when they're on the ball and the rest of the game they could care less about. And that sounds obvious, but there's lots of those kids, and it shows through when you're watching the game.
Thanks, mate. Guys, anybody want to come on and ask Stewart a question while you've got... and guys, I understand that for some of you, this is, you know, way off. I just wanted to give you an intro, you know, to what to expect. So please, if anybody wants to ask a question, shoot away.
Wait, does it matter in like the formation and how a person's supposed to act in the certain formation of how they're playing?
No, honestly, no. I know that's discussed a lot, but I am yet to coach a good player in a 4-4-2 that wouldn't be a good player in a 4-3-3. I am yet to coach a good player in a 3-5-2 that wouldn't be a good player in a 4-5-1. Usually, if a kid is a good player in one position and a bad player in another position, if you want the truth, it's because they've decided that they're a good player in this position, and they've decided if the coach plays a different formation, it's much harder. It's not real. It's in your head. And it's a real dangerous road to go down, because if you ask about, let's take the answers I've just given Maddie. Good 1v1 defending, good first touch, passing ability, ability to join the attack, fitness, intensity, energy, and competition. You tell me which formation that doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
Just a general word of advice for all of you, and this goes for all young players. There's macro and micro parts of the game. Macro
I
is
have one more question.
Macro is formational, and all formations is there might be at certain times in the game more of your players in one position area of the field and more of theirs in another. The more time you spend worrying about that, usually the worse you're going to be, because the micro details of winning your 1v1 battles, passing well, having a good first touch, defending well, attacking well, are going to be fine. Here's an example. I play 4-4-2. You play 3-5-2. The formational issue is you have 3 central midfielders and I have 2. But if I play well and I get the ball into centre midfield and I get it out wide, I now have 2 players and you have 1. I have a fullback and a wide mid. You've got 1 wing back. Same formation. You're now at a disadvantage. I've seen young kids say, we can't play. There's an extra guy in that area of the field. When you absolutely can play, you can get it in and out that area quickly, and you can have a man up. And kids that have usually decided before the game what they want to play and not play, they tend to wear themselves down with anxiety.
Good question.
Wait, and does it like how the team plays, like the formation of, like if they're playing 3 at the back or 5 at the back or 4, does it matter how, does it affect how the team plays? Like if they're defending, attacking, or holding?
Not much. Not much. It's usually formations are usually based on who has the most of the ball. Because if I'm playing against Laurie and Laurie's playing 3 at the back, but over the course of 20 minutes, he keeps turning the ball over and he keeps giving it to me and I send runners forward, Laurie's now playing 5 at the back. Or I have 4v3 and 5v3. So it's not actually the formation. It's the execution and the performance of the team. Because if I play 4-2-2-3-1 against you and I have the ball and I dominate and I get it up front, I might have a high centre forward, 2 wingers, a number 10. My 8 might have come up and a fullback. I'll have 6 bodies forward. But if you've got the ball, I might have a back 4, my 2 defensive mids having to mark, and one of the wingers tracking a fullback. Now I've got 2 or 3 forward. It's not the formation. It's the execution and the ability to establish possession, and the team with the ball has the upper hand. Because what you'll never do in soccer, or what you should never do, some young players do this, if the other team has the ball and makes runs, you have to track them. You have to. You can't say I'm a high winger and he's a fullback. I can't run that 60, 70 yards. If he's your man and he's run that far, then you got to go. That's not your coach being defensive. That's you doing your job. And if the answer is, well, I don't want to run back 60 yards, well, keep the ball. And that's back to micro and macro, because if you can take care of the details of the games and your touch is good and you can move it out of pressure and you can put passes together, you will always have the other team on the back foot, and you will always be numbers-wise have more bodies high and forward. A lot of people watch TV and they're like, oh, that coach chose to sit in. Very few coaches choose to sit in. But if you're going to give the ball away, then you're going to defend. That's really a non-negotiable the higher you go up the game.
Stu, got a question from Vienna. How important is it to play multiple positions whilst developing, and at what age, in your opinion, should you really focus on a sole position?
It's a great question. I'm a bad person to answer it. And the reason I say I'm a bad person, I've never really coached under U15. Like I've done summer camps and I've done sessions, but I've never really went through a full year with anything under U15. But I don't think there's anything wrong with specializing, just because it's not that hard to switch. It really isn't. You know, I don't know if you guys know Sol Campbell, but Sol Campbell was a centre-back for England, World Cup level centre-back for England. And he'd played his entire youth career and made his Tottenham Hotspur debut as a striker. And then it got decided that he was a centre-back and he was going to come back and he was going to be trained. I am a believer that if you play centre-mid, you can play anywhere. I believe that if you can play centre-mid and you can have that tactical understanding and you can get the ball with options of 360 degrees that you have to play and be aware of, it's very, very easy for you to now go to right back and relearn. Maybe emphasize 1v1 a bit more. It's very, very easy for you to drop to centre back and have the whole game happen in front of you. Wyatt played attacking centre mid for me at Portland Phoenix, and then was a 4-year centre back at Dartmouth with minimal adjustment time, and now is an MLS centre back. So I don't know the answer as to specialising. I think the overarching factor is to be playing, to be enjoying playing, and to take pride in mastering your position. And I think having those traits and habits will allow you to move to a different position and take them with you. I think the mindset of I'm only good at this one position and I can't do anything else is very self-limiting. Like the formation thing. If coach plays a 4-4-2, I'll play well. If coach plays a 3-5-2, I won't play well. That is all created up here.
Sure. Maddie's got another good question. I'm sure you asked it a lot as well. Stu, what if a player is good at multiple sports? Do they focus on one or not? You know, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I would say at the D1 level, it's getting much rarer to see multi-sport athletes. Now, we have had 2 at Dartmouth, so it's not that it never happens. They've both been track athletes. But I would say you have to make sure that you're in the recruitment window. Because if you're a soccer player and you play high school soccer in the fall, that's not getting watched. And it's actually nothing to do with that argument, high school's good, high school's not good. Doesn't matter at all, to be honest with you. I've seen high school teams better than club teams. I've seen club teams better than high school teams. The fact is, in the fall, D1 soccer is playing, and we don't really expend many of our resources out on the recruitment trail. And then in the spring, we'll watch tons of games. And in the winter, we'll watch a lot of games. So if you're playing lacrosse in the spring and we're recruiting in the spring, you can figure out yourself the issue that we run into. So I wouldn't say I'm personally against it or for it or have much an opinion of it. I've seen examples of both. All I could say is on our team, most recruits specialize in soccer and play it 9-10 months a year. Because at D1 level, that's how it is. You know, if a kid is not in the habit of playing soccer in the winter and spring, we'd be kind of foolish to expect them to all of a sudden be in that habit when they came here. Now in D3, it can work differently. Because in D3, if you find an athlete that would help the soccer team and help the lacrosse team, then both the coaches can go to admissions with the kid and they only use half a spot each. So what was a disadvantage is now an advantage. So I think it can work both ways. I just follow what you want to do and the guidance of your, your parents and your coaches.
Thanks, mate. So I'm scrolling through. I'm trying to find the clever ones, Stu, but I'm struggling at the minute. Like that.
They're all clever.
Guys, anybody else? Anybody else got some more questions before we finish up?
You were saying that college coaches were mainly looking at the juniors and seniors right now.
Yeah.
Is it still worth the freshmen and sophomores to be paying the money to go to these ID camps?
So I think it is, but it's not because you're going to leave those camps and get offered spots. The reason I think there's some benefit to it is they're very nerve-wracking and they're very high anxiety. And I get a lot of emails of, oh, he didn't play well. You know, it was tough. He had all these coaches and clipboards scribbling and staring at him, and he didn't know any of his teammates, and it was a new environment. So I think the biggest advantage of going as a freshman and sophomore is by the time you go as a junior and you're getting exposed to that environment for the third time, you're probably less likely to buckle under any anxiety. Now, you might be the kind of kid where it doesn't bother you, but I will just tell you there's plenty of kids it does affect pretty significantly.
Yeah, thank you.
Good question, Jordan. I'm sure you get asked this a lot. I'm gonna rephrase it because you kind of answered this, Stu, on one of it. But by the time players get to college level, how often do you move their positions? How often is your right minor striker?
Very, very often. 1 or 2 freshmen a year. Reason being, we had one kid, I'm not going to give you his name, but he was a right back. And he was an excellent right back. He was national team, U23 for the country he came from. I'm not giving you the country because you could easily find him. But he wasn't the best right back on the team. He wasn't. There was an MLS Academy right back who was a senior who was playing very, very well. And we didn't want to have him off the field, but we did want the freshman on the field. So what we did is we played that freshman at right wing. Was it his position? No. But he played 9, 10, 11 games there. He had some good games. He had some bad games. But here's what happened the next year when that senior had graduated and we put him in. And instead of it being his debut in college soccer, he actually had 9, 10, 11 games worth of exposure to the crowds, the speed, the strength, the tempo of the game. And his first game at right back went a lot smoother. I believe if he'd have sat here as the backup right back and never got on the field, I believe he'd have had a rough first month in his sophomore year. So we do that for those reasons. If you are good and we believe you're good, we're not just benching a senior just because you're good. That's not really how the world works. But there might be a way we can get you on the field that will usually involve a switch in position. And you can imagine a kid that tells himself, oh, I'm not going to play well because I'm a right winger. You know, he doesn't get the right back his sophomore year, right? You've got to be flexible.
Thanks, mate. Good question, Issa. Guys, any more? Last couple of questions.
I'm going to do the shy ones a favor. I'm going to put my email in here, and I also do some sports psychology. So if anybody wants to ask a question in private, there's the email, and there's a link you can have a look at.
Sure, I'll pass it on as well to everyone in our group.
Sound. Legend. That's about it.
Yeah, let me just get the picture of that. There we go. Okay, guys. Stu, thanks ever so much. I think I appreciate that. Appreciate your time first and foremost, guys. We've had professional academy in the UK, professional first team in the UK, and I just thought it's really important to add a college aspect to this as well to show you, how different it is. There's things that I learned today. club hopping and positions that in college that I wasn't sure about or didn't know about before. So it's really important. But Stu, you've explained it really well, even though we've lost you. Have you gone? Stu? Anyway, guys, Stu's gone. We've lost him. But hopefully you enjoyed that. I'll send all of his details on the group app, and thanks everyone for their time. Enjoy yourself. I'll speak to you soon. See you later, guys. And parents, bring your cleats on the weekend, please, if you're coming. Big game on the weekend.
Bye.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.